What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the podcast. We've got a fantastic guest for you guys today. You've probably seen more of the dog than Christian, but Christian, we've got Christian here with Uncharted. Christian has a very interesting backstory. He currently resides in Utah, one of the most beautiful states in the union, I would say. That's what's kept me here for the longest time. But Christian and I have run in similar circles, have a lot of friends here in the outdoors industry, and I've just known about Christian for a while and about Uncharted, and wanted to bring him on to kind of get to know him a little bit more, and to have you guys also out there listening get to know Christian and what Uncharted can provide you, whether it's adventure hunting all the way to a rescue kit in your truck or your vehicle, which I feel like everyone should have, whether you think you're getting into adventurous territory or not. There's always something that can happen with vehicles because they're a lot like human bodies that can just go wrong at any moment. So with that being said, Christian, for people that don't know who you are you, man?
Who am I? Yeah, I mean, these days I'm trying to build a company. I would say that Uncharted is, as much about building a profitable company as it is about a mission. I've done a lot of things in my life, and I knew that when I kind of did my thing, like the one thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to be in the outdoor space, and I wanted to build a for-profit business. I think we all like to go on big hunts and big trips and, have a big life, but at the same time, I really wanted to leave the world better than I found it. That was a big part of this. It took me years thinking about, what's the product I can build in the outdoor space that would do this. Just eventually led me to starting Uncharted. So, that's what I'm doing now. I spend a lot. I'm in Park City, Utah. I really enjoy spending a lot of time out in the wild, whether it's hunting or riding the flares or skiing or just hiking around with my dog who's snoring next to me. You might hear him. That's who I am these days. I'm going to be 45 next week. I'm single, so before we got on here, it's something I'm trying to solve for. Um, for now, my life is really the business and trying to keep myself fit and enjoy this beautiful earth we're on and do some good.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting. If you guys know Uncharted, the symbol, the dog that's there, that's based on your puppy, right?
Well, yeah. So interesting story. Yeah, I when I first started Uncharted, I was like working with like eagle logos. I don't know why, just because of America and like you could fly away for I don't know. I was like, oh, be an eagle. And then as I got thinking about it, I really liked the idea of the Saint Bernard. Saint Bernards were bred by the monks in the Bernard Pass that people used to cross between a couple countries in Europe. And a lot of people would try to do it, and a storm would roll in and they get stuck out there. So the monks bred these big dogs that had amazing sense of smell. They could dig like crazy. They could pull people, and they would send them out in the storms to find these like weary lost travelers and bring them into the monastery and warm them up and save them. So I really liked that idea as it related to a company that was going to build stuff that hopefully saves you when you're in a pinch, right? That's what I did. At the time, I had a bulldog. And when he passed away, everybody said, you got to get a St. Bernard now. But I've seen Beethoven, and I like my house clean. And
Mm-hmm.
so I never really wanted a St. Bernard, but I like the idea of having a big dog at the booth and at events. And as you said, like a lot of people recognized a dog before me, which was kind of by design. I wanted that to be kind of the part that's always around the brand. And so I found Baron. He's a Swiss Mountain Dog. He's about 115 pounds, which is about half the size of a Saint Bernard. Doesn't drool too bad. Doesn't shed too much. Pretty chill. And yeah, he's kind of our mascot. So that's what the logo is. It's not a Rorschach test or anything like that. It's actually a dog head.
Yeah, yeah. It's and your dog's definitely like a small bear. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not anything tiny, that's for sure, but very, very loving and enjoys being around people, which is good. You can get the opposite with dogs sometimes at events, but no, that's
Mhm.
awesome. So, with that being said, you went from musician to you're a musician. And you're kind of giving me that look of like, explain, I
Yeah.
guess, what you were a musician at one point in your life. And I'm sure you still are. Most musicians don't ever really quit. But what instrument did you play? What do you sing? Like what was your gig?
Yeah, I mean, my life has definitely been all over. I grew up on a farm in northwest Wisconsin, and in high school I broke my ankle playing football my sophomore year. And not to date myself too much, but it wasn't like there was Facebook to scroll or an iPhone to stare at. So I convinced my parents to help me buy a guitar and a Beatles Easy Chord book. I just started playing, right? And then, my brother would come down and play Zach, and then we'd have the neighbor come over, and we had this little band we were playing in. And I always kind of said I would stick with it as long as it kept growing, and it kind of just grew for like a decade. So, um, it's a long, meandering story. But we ended up in Minneapolis working with the guys that worked with Prince, his drummer, his keyboard player, Prince himself sometimes. We worked with Phil Solem, who is most famous for writing I'll Be There For You, the Friends theme song. He was kind of our songwriting partner. We had a producer that did all the records for everybody from Bon Jovi to Miley Cyrus to Switchfoot to the Backstreet Boys. And we just found ourselves in this like circle of superhuman musicians. And, we did 3 albums, played all over the world. And it just became this thing we were doing. And, long story short, kind of, music was hard. I always tell people like, they're like, why'd you quit? It seemed like it was going well. And I'm like, well, you're like a 100-meter sprinter. You know how fast you have to be to get paid, right? With music, it's just one day you think you're going to be the next big thing. Some kid in his basement makes a new sound, and everybody goes in that direction. It was just such a hard, non-linear path for somebody like me who was like, tell me what I have to do, and I'm going to do it to be successful, right? So we were kind of, we were still touring, and I was kind of getting tired of the late nights. And I'm an outdoors guy, and I spent my whole life growing up on a farm, getting up at 4:30 and milking cows, and it was just hard to be up till 4:30. And
Mm.
then I couldn't sleep during the day. I was just wired to be awake. And we were at South by Southwest, big music festival in Austin, Texas, and some dudes with military high and tight haircuts came up and asked if we want to play for the troops. And that really turned into almost a decade of doing shows overseas in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. My brother was really instrumental in kind of, we learned that there was like all these bases that weren't getting entertainment simply because they were small bases without runways, and the equipment was so big you needed a C-130. So we figured out how to build a PA system that would fit into a Black Hawk helicopter,
Hmm.
allowing us to hit all these bases. And once our band, which we did 150 shows over a bunch of years, started doing it, then it was like, who else you got? So we would send Action Sports, we'd send Spin Doctors, we'd send Hoobastank, we'd send, like the dudes from Brothers Osborne sleep on my couch, and then we'd send them over to Iraq. I mean, we were, a lot of interesting groups we worked with. That became a big part of my life for a long time. I started working with brands while we were doing those tours, Harley Davidson, GoPro, doing kind of marketing programs around that. It was always, the idea was to make it better for the troops, right? So GoPro, one tour, we gave every troop we met a GoPro camera. Harley Davidson gave
Wow.
away motorcycles, leather jackets, and shirts. And then when that all kind of wound down with the war ending, those same brands um, asked me to do more stuff stateside. So my brother and I did a lot of marketing programs for them. Everything from like helping plan Harley Davidson's 105th anniversary to cool activations with GoPro. Um, Took a job in Southern California with a company we were doing some work for, and that's when I really got the idea for Uncharted. So I'm growing up on a farm with a bunch of helpers. If there's a tornado, we'd all go and take the chainsaws and help cut the neighborhood out. Military, it's team oriented. Everybody knew what to do. They knew where to go. They were capable. And I moved to Newport Beach, where like if it rained, everybody just locked their door and it was every man for themselves, and they assumed that AAA or Amazon Prime or whatever was going to save the day. And it was really a hard thing for me to be comfortable with, because you hear about the West Coast and earthquakes and all that. And at the same time, I'm around people that just can't even change a car tire, and they just don't have the experience, right? They didn't grow up on a farm or, with those types of experiences. So that's what really led me down the path of like, wow, how do you fix this at scale? Like, how can you make the world a safer place for everybody. And my belief was, unfortunately, people aren't going to do a lot of training, right? I just don't think that people are going to spend money and commit days to firearms training and survival training. What they want to do is they want to throw money at something and check a box and feel like they're in a better position. Okay, if that's human behavior, can you build a product that actually will make a difference in those moments? And so that's what really led me down the path of building our first product, which was a survival kit, and kind of launching Uncharted. So long answer to your question, but that's how I got here through all of my experiences. And I think we're making a difference. I think we are starting to get to a place where there's a lot of scale, and it's exciting to see this brand grow as hard as it's been to get there.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely not a straight line path to
No.
creating a company and get into the more that I wouldn't even say survivalist, but preparedness mentality. And I know for a while, being a prepper kind of gets a bad rap, but in all honesty, we should all be prepared at some degree for example, I grew up in North Carolina. We had hurricanes every year, whether they were bad or not is what really affected things. And so there was always those when every couple years it'd be a really bad one, we'd send people from our congregation or our ward down to Hurricane Katrina or things like that. That's kind of what we would do is band together and send men usually down to help out with the cleanup. Out here out west, there's earthquakes, there's more wildfires, which we never really dealt with in North Carolina. Never really cared
Yep.
about earthquakes. You hear about them, how catastrophic they are. Tornadoes, you never really dealt with those either. But wherever you live in the world, there is some kind of natural disaster that's possible. Hopefully, it never happens, but more than likely, you'll live through a couple in your life, whether they're big or not. Just depends on luck of the draw, kind of. But that's kind of where Uncharted comes in, where you've got everything from first aid kits to trauma kits to pack rafts for those adventure hunters that maybe want to cross a stream and get to a spot where people don't usually go for hunting,
Hmm.
or you don't want to walk the extra 15 miles that way to get across the river, up to the spot. So there's a lot of stuff that your company does. So I guess kind of break it down for people that don't know. Everything from your first aid to something I'm personally really interested in and we'll probably end up picking up um here soon is that Zeus Air that you have.
Yeah, pretty sweet.
There's a lot of stuff. So anyway, from first aid kit, let's start there. Your basic first aid kit, what makes your first aid kit stand out from others that are out there?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying you're talking about people being exposed to, weather events. We've done some research since 1980, which is the year I was born. $1 billion natural disasters have increased 15% every year. So think about 15% over 45 years. It's just incredible, like the change in what's happening with weather patterns. And then you throw in, like, as we're talking today, there's riots in Los Angeles, so there's spreading around the country. We just went through COVID a few years ago. There's just a lot of reasons for people to be their own hero, right? Like, be their own safety net, have a plan, be able to take care of their family. And so that's always my message to people is like, you may not be in the market for a first aid kit today, but I can promise you someday you will be. And it might be expensive when you buy it now, but it's definitely priceless when you need it. If you
Well,
have
and I'll just hit on that too with, recently, well, within, I can't remember, it's almost been 2 years now, but at least no, maybe not. Within the last year, the big hurricane that happened that hit Western North
Mm-hmm.
Carolina. And the thing is, it was honestly, it was a shit show. That's basically what I've gathered. I haven't gone to that area. I know people that live in that area. I know people that went and helped in the initial efforts. But essentially, between the government and private entities wanting to take
Yeah.
credit for things, and then you got the news media trying to take credit for things, there's so much that can get mixed up, and too many hands in the too many cooks in the kitchen, and people, and then you mix in pride and ego and profit and nonprofit and all these things to where you don't think that that's going to happen. You hope that the government will come in and do what you've been paying taxes for, but honestly, you don't know. And in this situation with the Western North Carolina stuff, there was nowhere for the water to run because it's all bedrock, and so it just knocked out tons of bridges, which in turn knocks out power and then the ability to restore those power lines, which again, they hadn't obviously planned on. And on top of that, a lot of people go to Western North Carolina to kind of retire or spend their life savings on a piece of property and never have to work again. And that's it. They don't have insurance. They don't deal with that. So that's kind of what a lot of people don't think about is they think, again, the government or local people are going to be able to help. And sometimes they aren't even able to.
No, I mean,
And
we were like, let's go down and help. And I didn't want to just show up and be in the way
mm,
because I know how these things go. I have friends down there. I mean, we called for weeks trying to find a way to show up and help. And
mm-hmm,
I feel bad that I never went because probably said I was going to go, but I was never able to find something that felt reasonable. Like, okay, I know I can go here and I can show up here and I can do this. There was no path for people like me or you to go down and be able to help, which was really disappointing. What we ended up doing was I thought I was connected to this great guy that was going out and doing a bunch of animal rescues, a really good dog trainer. And we just kind of highlighted him to our audience, collected a bunch of money. He bought a bunch of dog food and cages and was out rescuing pets that were just displaced and floating around. And, that was the best. It was better than nothing. It didn't feel like a lot. But yeah, to your point, man, it feels like everybody gets down there and tries to wave a flag to show like how helpful they're being, but
mm-hmm.
really there's very few ways to make a difference.
Well,
So
and even the
it's tough.
people that were there that able to help when they would go in some instances, the people were like, "Oh, it's okay, take so and so because I mean the government will be here in a couple of days. I've got enough food until the FEMA or
Hmm.
whoever is going to show up in a couple of days." And it's just that mindset of someone else is going to be there for me, which would be great, and that's kind of how the system should be, but
Right. Right.
in all reality, it's not always going to end up that way, and it's not always going to be perfect. So being your own parachute, again, whether that's being the dad that carries and knows how to use a firearm, and even before you get to a firearm, knows how to get hands on with someone to defend his family. That's being your own first responder. Because, by the time your wife calls the cops and the cops get there, who knows what could happen to the child or to your wife or to whatever. And knowing the levels of escalation to get to the point where you may have to take a life. In the other regards of having first aid kits or trauma kits, if you see a wreck and you're trained at least to be able to initially help,
Yeah.
then by the time the EMTs get there, maybe you save that person's life because they can now take over, and you filled in the gap of 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes that it took for them to get there because you were prepared, you had the equipment available to you. And there's so many different things that can happen. And if you're not prepared, I feel like that's why, like you were saying, in the area you were living, if it rained, people locked their doors and hoped someone else would take care of it. You can be the other way, not that you're looking for problems and you obviously hope there never is, but if it does happen, you can be there to save someone's life, to help, to provide comfort, whatever it may be, because you're prepared, you're knowledgeable, and you're comfortable in those uncomfortable situations to help other people.
Yeah, we always say heroes and helpers, right? We're trying to make heroes and helpers out of people. I don't believe that the first responders are going to be able to hit everybody or take care of everybody. So who's next, right? Well, gosh, um, if you feel confident enough with your supplies and your aptitude that you can not only take care of your family but check on the elderly neighbor next door, that's one less person that they maybe have to check on,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now if you take 1 million people and have that mindset, now you're taking care of 2 million people, and that's a huge dent, right? So they're kind of audacious goals, but in my beliefs, that's how we change this country from being every man for himself to communities again. We have a transient. I lived in LA. The reason there's no communities there is because everybody's from somewhere different.
Mm-hmm.
Where I grew up in Wisconsin, nobody leaves. That person's mom and grandma and great grandma, And that creates community where you care about people and you take care of them. But if you don't know somebody, there's a higher threshold to like get uncomfortable and go help a stranger. But that's something we have to change because, you know, humans have only survived through the power of community. Whether it was hunting a woolly mammoth or fighting off an invading army, nobody did that by themselves, right? That was like teamwork. And more, I think we're just insulated from that in a lot of places in this country, and it's why we see a lot of the chaos. Personally, that's what I think.
And it's also easier to be disparaging or yeah, I guess yeah, disparaging towards another person if you don't know them. That's why, you know, social media, you've got these people that literally sit in their basements and don't ever have human contact but are willing to say nasty things online.
Yeah, right,
But you
right.
know, they'd never say that to your face because one, they can't defend their spot, but two, you know, they're not willing to take that punch that's going to come if they say that to someone in public. And so, yeah, it's definitely community is a big deal. Knowing people, you know, even if you don't have a specific like a compound per se, knowing people in your neighborhood, like, hey, I know that's the car guy, and you know he's part of my crew. If something happens, like he's gonna come and fix the
Mechanic,
cars,
an
and I'm gonna go
electrician.
hunt the food. You know, like
Yeah, exactly.
that's kind of that's everyone can have a skill set or multiple skill sets that intertwine, and even having those, you can bring it up kind of jokingly, but I have spoken with people in my, you know, community here of just like, hey, if XYZ happen, just know this is what you can rely on me for, and you know, vice versa. I'm going to look at you for my HVAC stuff because I have no idea what I'm doing down there. And I'm going to end up breaking something. So, you know, that's kind of how you can do it. Bring it up a little jokingly, but at the same time, what guy doesn't want to kind of doomsday, not prep, but just kind of like have those thoughts around the fire. You know, you're just like, oh man, you know, if this did happen, man, I think I'd be taken care of. You know, it just kind of, those conversations are fun to have. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it's totally true.
mhm,
We have a program called the Four Pillars on our website. It's resources, resourcefulness, mental and physical fitness, and community. And honestly, like probably one of the smartest things anybody can do is get to know the people around them and build friendships. Because, like to your point, if there's a doctor down the street, if there's an electrician, if there's a mechanic, um, and that's all you have to rely on. Boy, what a big advantage versus just being on your own, where you just have that single skill set, right?
yep. And
So,
unfortunately, you know, there was also the reports of certain areas where they'd bring in, and going back to Western North Carolina, they'd bring in the food, and someone would come out of nowhere with this one guy was saying that this lady with her boyfriend came out and was trying to control who got what food. And he was like, "Oh, hold on. Like this is going to everyone equally. You don't." But like that's what happens when things go to chaos. You don't know who has anxiety, who has, you know, control issues and things like that unless you know your community and you kind of get an awareness of how people are going to react in those situations just through hanging out with them, seeing how they interact with their kids, how they interact with that car whipping around the neighborhood. You know, are they the one that's going to blow up, or are they the one that just kind of, you know, calmly is like, man, that guy's an idiot, and making sure things are taken care of. Like there's so many different things that you can kind of vet your community and check them out, and I recommend people do that. You know, it's not something you talk about. It's not the cool flashy new gear kind of deal, but you should know your community and at least spend some time with them and get to know who they are. Invite them over for a barbecue or go for a walk, go for bike rides, things like that. Camping trips, you know, just get to know your community. So I know we've kind of derailed a little bit, but let's go back to the to
you're
Uncharted
asking
here
about
and kind
products.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, the products that you guys provide with between first aid kits, because you can go buy a first aid kit from Walmart for, I don't know, like $20, but it's going to have band-aids, maybe some triple antibiotic ointment, and some Tylenol or, you know, ibuprofen or something like that. But that's not a real first aid kit. That's kind of like the boo-boo kit, you know, that
Yeah.
everyone should have anyway. What's your first aid kit, and then walk us through maybe some different tiers that you have of your, you know, first aid to trauma kits.
Yeah, we start with on the small end of things, a little 130-gram first aid and gear repair kit. You know, the idea there, I think a lot in concentric circles. So You got a 40-pound first aid kit? That's awesome. You're probably not going to carry it on your back if you're out in the mountains or mountain biking, right? So then it becomes you don't have a first aid kit because you don't have one on you. So, we have stuff that's, from 130 grams up to a pound and a half, up to our, 16-pound two-person survival kit, up to the 8-person, and it just kind of, the idea is to create the product that fits your life the best. How many people are you trying to take care of? How many of them are, dependents, like young kids or elderly? How many, how far are you going from home? Like, are you traveling in your car or are you walking to work? And trying to give coverage to people wherever they are, because, there's that quote, the best camera is the one in your hand. It's the same thing with a first aid kit, right? Like the one at home is not doing you any
Sorry, I've
good.
never heard the camera one. I've heard the gun, but I've,
Oh, well, same
yeah.
thing. Yeah, yeah.
I
But
say
like,
it's the same as like, what's the best? Well, honestly, I'd love to have a long range rifle and an AR, and not even worry about the pistol. But at the same time, you're not going to stuff those in your pants and walk around stiff legged all day. So,
right, right.
yeah.
So, yeah, we think about that, and back to your point, I've one of my favorite sayings is 100 band-aids never saved a life, and I think that's been the problem in this space. Is you go to Walmart or somewhere like that, and you see a Johnson and Johnson kit, and they sell by pieces, a 50-piece kit, a 100-piece kit, and it's just a bunch of band-aids and gauze, right? And maybe some ointment. So
And not
what
even
we've
good
really tried
gauze.
to
It kind
do
of just
is,
falls apart.
yeah, what we've really tried to do is, I mean, there's a lot of things to our kits, but one is instead of fixing one problem like a paper cut 100 times, we want to try to solve 100 things once or twice. So have as much coverage as possible for whatever happens, because you can't predict what the emergency or the injury is going to be. On top of that, it's high quality stuff. We really spend a lot of time on making sure it's really good stuff. We focus on organization and then instruction as well. So when you open up our kits, everything's labeled and color coordinated, and then it ties into the instructions inside. Because what people don't think about when they're buying stuff is how they are going to operate when their adrenaline is going through the roof and they're in a situation they've never been in. I always say, like, you don't want the
You
Super
lose your
Bowl to be the first game
dexterity
you've
and
ever
all
played.
that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So you get tunnel vision, your heart's pounding, you're trying to make quick decisions, and anything you can do to help guide people. And literally, our kits will have steps 1 through 5 on do this and do this, and you can do that, right? You can follow paint by numbers, and then that makes the situation better, and hopefully help arrive so you can get to the next level of care. So that's a big part of it. A lot of our kits are just totally bomb-proof, waterproof. We get teased a lot for being overbuilt. I mean, our backpack that holds 11 pounds of gear, I've used it to carry elk quarters out just to make sure you carry that much weight. But look, if I'm going to sell something that I tell you is going to make a difference in an emergency, it better perform. And so you think about every aspect, having our kits organized with instructions in a dry bag that mice aren't going to get into, bulls aren't going to get into. If it's raining, emergencies happen, not usually when it's 75 and sunny, but when there's cold, wet weather, being able to open that up and have everything pristine is really important. So there's just, there's not one thing. It's looking at kind of every aspect of an emergency, how how people react in those situations, and how we can try to provide a full solution to them, or as much of a full solution as possible. So, you know, like I said, all of our products have those aspects built into it, and we're just really trying to make it. I hate to use this analogy, but I look at Yeti. People used to go buy coolers. They buy a Coleman cooler. Sorry, Coleman, for trashing you here, but like nobody wanted to buy a Coleman cooler. I've never seen anybody wear a Coleman hat at a country music concert, right? They didn't work very well. They usually broke, sometime in the off season in the garage, like the hinges broke. And now you've got a brand that charges you a lot more, but they're indestructible. They work better. It's a better experience, and it actually says something about who you are. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to take people from these commodity things that don't really work and buy something that you believe in, that also you can be proud to have, because it it allows you to save the day in those times. We don't like to sell through fear. I always say, like, be the hero of your own story. I want people to look at our products as like the superhero's cape in their car, and then they can go save the day, versus trying to sell somebody on fear tactics. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big answer to your question around how we differentiate.
Yeah, no, but I mean, honestly, it makes sense. And I would say that I agree. I wouldn't say overbuilt. I'd say built well. And it's built to last. It's built to the stuff that you guys produce is definitely higher quality. You can feel it just from picking up the packs. Anyone that's gone to Total Archery Challenge, I think this last year, you guys were the first aid sponsor for that.
Yeah, for a
Uh,
couple of years, yeah, they're at all
yeah.
the aid stations or the water stations, and even that's like one of my favorite stories. We have our first aid plus kits out there, which are completely waterproof, and those kits are now a few years old at these events. And um, if you don't know Total Archery, I mean, how many do they have? Like 15 a year, 20 a year,
Mm-hmm.
where 4 days, call it, you're on the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, 20 events times 4 days. These kits are literally just sitting on a mountainside, rain or shine. This year it's been a lot of rain, from what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the kits look like they've been through Katrina, the ones that are up there. And then you open them up and they're just totally pristine, totally clean. And that's a classic example of what we're trying to do, right? If you have a kit and you go to use it and it's all moldy, you don't have a kit. So
Exactly.
let's build something that actually works no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you're right. I mean, again, first aid's not the flashy topic. It's not the
Yeah,
cool thing because you don't pull that out of your backpack and then say, "Hey, this is my new arrows or my new broadhead or my new knife or whatever." It's not
right.
the cool thing that you can use immediately. You hope to never use it, but at the same time, it definitely makes a difference. Um,
Yeah, but it's pretty
having
cool
the
if you can help somebody out of a tough situation, right? So
exactly,
it's just
exactly, and
planning for
then
that one day.
and that's a discussion I have with many of my hunting partners as well. I tell them, hey, my first aid kit is in this pack in this pouch, and generally most of them honestly don't carry something, which kind of freaks me out a little bit. But I always make sure I've got at least one tourniquet per person, which usually ends up being a handful of tourniquets that I've got. But like at least I could have one for each limb if I need, and I've got one for someone's neck if they piss me off enough. But they
There you go.
so yeah, how dumb can you be? You got cut in the face. All right, guess I got to tourniquet your neck here. No, okay. But in all honesty, it's something again. Just I always try and have that conversation when I do go and hunt with other people, and let them know where it's at in case they need it, or if something's happened to me, they know where my Garmin is, how to access my phone, and send that SOS off the Garmin, and where my trauma kit is, and especially the tourniquets. It's just something that it's invaluable. Again, it's not a fun conversation. You hope to never have to use it, but how many times have you heard of someone trying to chase down that bull? They're trying to knock an arrow while they're running, trip, and the arrow goes into their thigh, or barely misses their femoral artery, or
Yeah.
cuts them open in the calf. Like there's so many stories out there, that and most of the time, honestly, from what I remember in these stories, people don't have a good trauma kit with them. And then
Right.
it makes them carry a trauma kit, which they'll hopefully never have to use again.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
they're
So
always trying to splice things together with a shirt or a jacket or, a makeshift splint, and it just kind of, I don't know. I hope to never be in that situation or be with anyone that's in that situation, but I just know people that hunt with me or go camping or backpacking with me know that I may have a little bit more weight in my pack than you, but you'll be well fed and you'll be taken care of in an emergency. So
yep. Important things
yeah,
for sure. For
exactly.
sure.
Exactly. No, that's awesome. So, we got the first aid trauma kits, and I'd recommend people going and checking them out over there on the website. And I'll leave that link down below. But also, you've got the Zeus Air, which is what I brought up, and the pack raft. So if we can hit on those two things real quick, the pack raft is definitely more of one of those, I'd say, adventure style hunters. If you're going to Alaska, if there's a big river or a creek that's possibly turned into a river, and your hunting trip that you're wanting to cross, or if you just want to go fishing and you want to have a little packable raft that you can
Hmm.
just kind of go float wherever you want.
Yep.
walk us through. You've got a couple different sizes on that too, right? Or is it just one size?
No, just one size. And take a step back. People are like, why do you make a raft when you're a first aid company? When we started until this day, we do everything welded with waterproof materials. Most of it's roll tops, right? So roll top with a buckle. Um, always wanted to make sure people didn't think we were just dudes putting a bunch of stuff in backpacks. Like I wanted to show that there's a lot of thought that goes into all of our products, and sometimes what you need is like a halo product to kind of display, the technical capabilities to make everything else feel more technical. Is how I look at that stuff. That raft was originally designed for a military request for crossing irrigation canals in Afghanistan. The contract ended up going to like a bridge system, not a boat system. So that product was kind of like, what else could we do with it? It's become this really cool product. That's to your point. Mostly what we see is guys up in Alaska using it to, run game down the river. They've harvested something, cross a marsh. I don't know how many videos I have of guys with caribou and moose and those things, taking them some river in the Brooks Range or something like that. Like it's really gotten cool. That said, when Montana flooded a few years ago, I was literally on my treadmill watching CNN one night, and this house was like up to its second windows of water. And I'm not even kidding, this kid comes out the second window in one of our photographs on CNN while I'm watching. And it was like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's like on the
Yeah.
couch, like, oh, hey, So it's a cool product in the fact that like I'm in a place where there's high water, potential. Um, it can be a life-saving tool as much as it can be a fun, you know, water water toy too. So, maybe there's a hurricane, you got to get grandma out of some deep water and she can't walk, or your kids. Maybe you want to. I mean, it holds 400 pounds. You can put 400 pounds of stuff in that thing and take it down a little bit of water and don't have to carry it. So that's a really cool product. On the design of that thing, we spent a year in the material before we even made it. It's 8 times more tear resistant and puncture resistant than the competitors of the same denier, which is like the thickness. It's really tough. It took us a long time to get the thing selling. I think people just didn't believe us. And now we're at the point where like we're sold out right now. We have about 150 of them coming here in a couple of weeks again. But it's caught on finally, which is really exciting. Switching gears over to the Zeus Air. Again, I didn't want to have a company that just built first aid kits or just did this one thing. I wanted us to look at emergencies and what are the things that happen most frequently to people that don't have a good solution. And the battery jump starter world was kind of picking up when we built our first one, which is just the Zeus, because Zeus is the god of lightning, right? I thought that was a fun name. And what we did is we looked at why there were failures with other products, how we could make one that was more reliable, more trustworthy. We use a technology they call high voltage multiplier. So in each one of our battery units, there's multiple battery cells. When you think about these things, and what they do is they'll just start your engine. Right? They literally turn the engine over to get the engine running. You're not recharging the battery in your car, which is an important differentiation. So it doesn't actually matter as much how big the battery is. It's how many, cold cranking amps it has to get an engine started. And because our units have multiple battery cells in them, we get the multiple of jump starting. So our 20,000 milliamp battery versus somebody else's, if we have 3 battery cells or 4 and they have 1, we're getting triple the jumping power, which is really, really amazing. If you read the reviews on our website, it just works. It saves people's butts every day. I bet every week I get a text from somebody where they send me a picture of the Zeus getting them out of a pinch. And now we have the Zeus Air, which we talked about, which also has a air compressor that does up to 150 psi. You can air down your tires, you can inflate your tires, you can inflate a paddle board or bike tires. There's a lot of things you can do, an air mattress. It's just a nice kind of additional feature onto something that's still only, this big. So those are great products, some of our best selling. And, in my opinion, every vehicle in the country should have one of those because I think like 95% of vehicle emergencies are you're out of gas, you have a flat tire, or you have a dead battery. And this one will literally solve two of those for not a lot of money and not a lot of effort. So, again, it's trying to find solutions for things that happen a lot, and that's a really great one.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I would definitely agree with that. If people out there, if you're into the overlanding, outdoorsy, it is nice to be able to air down your tires if you can on
Mm-hmm.
certain trails. I've been beating around the bush trying to figure out if I want to get an air compressor or what I wanted to do with my Tacoma, just because those washboard roads suck sometimes when you're on those for an hour and you just are just
Yeah.
taking it. You hear everything rattling loose that can while you're driving down this road. Um, but at the same time, being able to air up, your tires, or again, helping someone else in a pinch off the side of the road, just being able to help them. That's
My buddy
always
Craig previously lived in Bozeman, and it got really cold a couple winters ago. He texted me and sent me some pictures. He was literally just driving around town with his Zeus jumpsuit and people that had dead. He's like, dude, this is fun. And I'm like,
that's
this is
cool.
this is awesome. Is what this
Yeah.
is. Like, thanks for doing that. But it's cool to be a helper, right? It's cool to be like, hey, you need some help? I got you, and just help somebody out.
hmm Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. That's awesome. And again, I just can't reiterate enough. I understand for people out there, another first aid kit or something like that. Like genuinely, consider this should be part of your hunting outdoors budget at least once. If you don't have it set up already, make it part of your budget this year, and maybe don't buy that extra pack of broadheads or the extra dozen arrows that you were going to tinker with, or something like that. This first aid kit is definitely, and that's coming from someone who likes to tinker, guys. So that kind of hurts my heart a
Yeah,
little
we're
bit.
all we're all
But at the
gearheads for sure.
yeah, but at the same time, you need. I can't reiterate enough. You need to have a first aid kit that will provide more than just scratch, triple antibiotic, band-aid stuff. Like you need something that will actually help you, and especially if you go out in the mountains. I can guarantee you, especially you guys out there that have wives that get a little worried when you go out there by yourself, if if you can show that you have a way to communicate with the Garmin or whatever you choose. I personally choose Garmin. I feel like it's the most reliable personally, but
Love Garmin. Yep,
yeah, the
yep.
Garmin, um, and and a first aid kit, trauma kit, and you can show your spouse that you know how to use that stuff, it may not completely ease all of their concerns, but it will help a lot.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And you
will
don't,
and
you don't have to spend hundreds of dollars either. Our little triage kit that I alluded to a few times saved my dog's life a couple of years ago. A pretty infamous story up here, but I was skiing in the backcountry. A buddy of mine ran into my dog, cut his leg. He was hemorrhaging blood, and the kit is first aid and gear repair. There's zip ties, there's duct tape, there's gauze. I grabbed a stick, basically made a makeshift tourniquet. Shame on me didn't have a tourniquet with that day, but I did with my first aid kit. And it was enough to slow the bleeding significantly. I put him on my shoulder, skied him out, called the vet ahead of time, got there, and then I was like, I don't know how you got here so fast, and I don't know how you did this. So he had 10 minutes left max, right? And that's a $60 kit that weighs 130 grams. My goal always was not to encourage people to build bunkers and spend their life savings on whatever, but a little bit of the right stuff. So John Barklow, advisor for us, a friend of mine, kind of a big expert in this area, and he always says, sometimes good enough is good enough. And I like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have every single piece, but if you can do enough to get to the next stage, then that's enough, right? So, that would be my message to people is like, if you're not, I mean, you should absolutely have something. Doesn't mean you have to like take out a bank loan to
yeah,
be covered. A couple of the right
exactly.
pieces can go a long ways.
Exactly. I guess to kind of wrap it up, for say I'm someone that doesn't have anything and I want to get started. Name your top 3 items that you would recommend from Uncharted for someone that will say a man that's has got a spouse and maybe 1 or 2 kids and loves to go hunting and camping.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always want to know more, but the Zeus Air to me is a no-brainer as a start. Um, we spend a lot of time in our vehicles, right? And we depend on them. We don't think about them until they break. And it's a huge pain. So being able to start your vehicle and create shelter and create warmth, or get down the road, or inflate your tires, or just there's a lot of value that comes in having a vehicle that can move. So of three products, that's one for sure. The next thing I would recommend is, depending on your situation, either one of our survival kits or what I would call our first aid plus. The first aid plus is like a mini survival kit. It's a bunch of first aid, and then you've got a flashlight, a multi-tool, duct tape, zip ties, a handful of tools. Survival kit's got shelter, it's got waterproof insulated gloves, it's got goggles, it's got N99 masks, it's got a way to purify water and to start fire, literally everything you need. So kind of depends on your environment. I mean, the survival kit's definitely more expensive, but you can live on that thing for a long time. Have one of those, right? Depending on your situation, what your needs are, what your budget is, I have something like that in the car so you can take care of as much as possible. Beyond that, I brought up the triage kit a few times. Um, I love that one because it's always on you. We designed it to fit in your pocket or fit in a bike jersey or fit in a backpack, and you don't even know it's there. When people are trying to balance up their toothbrush to save weight in their packs because they have so much stuff, you don't want to have a 2 pound first aid kit taking up 10% of your bag. It's just, you might leave it home because the odds of you needing it aren't 100%, and I'm not going to carry this thing. Well, that's the wrong decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you want is some coverage. So with that little guy, at least you're covered for a lot of different things. And it's funny with that kit is the things I've used in it most are like blister gels. Imagine you go hiking, you start getting a hot spot in your boot. Everybody that's a hunter knows how that can just derail a couple days if you've got pain in your feet. Slap a blister gel on there. Don't even worry about it. It might not be life or death. It might just be being able to perform at your fullest because there was something you didn't expect, right? We've got those little zip stitches in there. Those are awesome. I had a buddy scope himself with a gun one time and had a huge gash above his eye and it was bleeding like crazy. And we dried it up, put some cream on it, pulled it tight, and put those on, and he never had to go get stitches. It just kept going.
That's awesome.
So again, it's not always life or death. It can be, but also sometimes it's just like keeping on the journey and taking these things that could get big and just making them very inconsequential. So that's why I really love that kit. So that would be my three that I'd recommend.
Yep. Triage kit, first aid plus, or survival kit, and
Yeah,
the Zeus Air.
Zeus Air.
And that's
Yeah,
good. That's definitely a good setup, for sure. So yeah, again, guys, I'm going to leave the link down below where you can go check out Uncharted, what they have to offer, and again, based on your needs, what you do and don't have, go and check that out. I'm assuming you've got listed out in each kit what comes in each kit, so people can kind of pick and
oh
choose.
yeah,
And then, do you sell tourniquets as well?
yeah. We sell tourniquets on the website. We actually, in all of our kits, have what we call a Slishman pressure bandage. I thought I had it on my desk here, but um, we've tested this. We've tested this with doctors. We've had a lot of different people look at it. It doesn't It doesn't sound intuitive, but this little pressure bandage is almost a better option a lot of times for a lot of people. So I'll say this: tourniquets are great. You have to train with them. You have to know how to use them. You just buy a tourniquet off the shelf and never open it until the time you need it. That's not a great situation to be in.
Yeah.
So
I say I always tell people you
that's,
should be able to put a tourniquet on one-handed. You should know how
yeah,
to do
which
that
isn't
on either arm.
exactly the
Yeah.
easiest if you haven't practiced too. And especially with adrenaline, spiking, you can go, oh, geez, what do I do with this windlass?
Mm-hmm.
Like how does this? The pressure bandage is really cool because it's just got a loop on the end that you stick your limb through, pull it tight, and you just keep wrapping until the blood stops. And if you don't get it tight enough, you can take it back off and wrap it again. It's very effective that way. You can make an arm sling with it. If you need to splint a leg, you can put a stick and wrap it. It's like 8 feet long. You can wrap it around and do a splint. There's just so many uses for that little thing, and it weighs nothing. It's just a tiny little bandage. So we do have that in all of our kits. That said, if you want to get a tourniquet, we sell those on our website as well.
Sweet. Awesome. Okay, guys. Yeah, definitely go check it out. Go support Christian and his crew over there at Uncharted. They definitely make a really good equipment. And if you need a raft, definitely go check out that pack raft. If you don't see them in stock on the website, they should be soon. At least, yeah, for a limited amount of time, So definitely go check those out if you need those, or you're looking to go to Alaska or have some adventure hunt, or you just want to add it to your kit. Definitely go check it out. So with that being said, Christian, is there anything else that we didn't touch on you want to hit on to wrap it up?
No, man, I just appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for having me, and respect. Keep it. Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate you coming on. And guys, like I always say, I want you guys to get out there, live your life to the fullest, love your life, actually create a life that you enjoy loving, that you love to live every single day, so that you don't go just clock in and out of a job and turn into, essentially just waiting to die. We don't ever want to be that person. So, definitely get out there, enjoy your life. And like I always say, guys, get out, live your life, and love it.